Good afternoon, everyone. I hope everyone is having a fantastic day so far. So today is Thursday, May 13th. I'm having a few issues with my green screen back here, so if I'm kind of fading into it, please ignore that. Today, I want to talk about generations, meaning baby boomers. We have post-war, we have boomers 1, boomers 2, millennials, Generation X, Gen Z. I want to talk about all of our generations because every generation has made themselves known in one way or another. Me, I'm a baby boomer too. Okay, and raising a Gen Z child. And I know that lately there have been situations, especially last summer, where sometimes boomers and millennials and especially Gen Zs didn't always get along or agree with how things should happen. What should happen, especially with all the protests last summer. Baby boomers, remember civil rights with Martin Luther King, with Malcolm X. And now we have these Gen Z kids who are basically speaking up and making themselves known in a way that baby boomers did not. And at first I didn't really agree with everything that they were doing. I do believe in peaceful protests. I do not believe that we should break windows or anything. When during civil rights, when Dr. King was marching, we weren't going around breaking windows and what have you. But then again, the time was different, because if we did, we would have been, hosed down with the fire hose, attacked by, German Shepherd dogs, police dogs, or worse, shot. Or someone would come to our house at night and, pull us out of our home and lynch us, or we would just disappear. Now things aren't necessarily happening like that now, but we are getting exterminated in different ways. And I'm just talking about African Americans. But in terms of, generations and, Gen Z as a whole, they're making themselves known, and they're not taking any crap for the most part. They're staying true to themselves. They're standing their ground, and they're saying, no, we're not going to deal with this. We're not going to do this. You cannot treat us this way. And I think the Gen Z generation will lead us into the future in terms of where we need to go as a country. And I'm interested to see how Gen Z turns out next year for the midterm elections, which are extremely, extremely, extremely crucial. And also in 2024. Now, to the Gen Z generation, I say to you, you may not agree with everything that my generation does, or your grandparents' generation, your great-grandparents' generation. But one thing that I do ask is that you respect the people who came before you, who made a positive difference, not only in this country, but in your life. So when we, go back, and I'm, when you look at civil rights, People tend to stop at Martin Luther King, but there was a whole generation of people before him. You know, you look at Susan B. Anthony, you know, and the part she played in women's rights. But unfortunately, those women's rights did not transfer over to women of color. You know, women of color didn't get a chance to vote until the Voting Rights Act of 1965. So in 1919, when, you know, women were allowed to vote, you know, or in 1920s and 30s and 40s and 50s, and the early part of the 60s, when, you know, white women were allowed to vote, women of color were not. People of color were not. So, you know, you have to always remember the people who came before you, who made a difference so that you can be where you are. And that is why I say this to these athletes out there who are making millions and gazillions of dollars and living in these multi-million-dollar homes. Don't forget about the people who had issues and, you know, could not stay in the same hotel as their team, or if they played a game or whatever, you know, you play the game and then you leave, especially if it was a sundown town and you were going to the next town or whatever, you know, or, you know, you had to get out. I don't care if you are Jackie Robinson. I don't care if you are Muhammad Ali. This is a sundown town. It's almost sundown. Get out. So to these athletes, I say to you, remember where you came from. But for these generations, we have generations of people who have experienced so many different things, you know, be it war, be it civil rights, be it floods, famine, the Depression. And I'm not talking about, you know, what we're seeing necessarily in the pandemic, because people did go hungry. But I'm talking about, you know, going back to the Depression of the 30s, where, you know, you had the Dust Bowl and, you know, people were just, I mean, it was bad. The Depression was bad. I mean, any depression is bad. But remember the people who came before you and what they went through. Now, on the other hand, it was baby boomer ones, baby boomer twos, World War I, World War II people. You know, I say to you, you know, that we have to appreciate and also respect what Gen X, Millennials, and Gen Z have done and are doing for us now. Because where we open the door, hopefully they will not only widen the door, but help keep that door open. The door of change, the door of equality, you know, the door of inclusion. Hopefully they will keep that door open. And I am going to share with you share my screen here. And let's see. I am going to, there we go, here we are. All right, so if you look at this here, age by generation, we have Gen Z goes technically from 1997 to 2012. Ages 9 to 24, millennials, 1981 to 1996, 25 to 40. Gen X, 1965 to 1980, 41 to 56. Boomers 2, 1955 to 1964, 57 years old to 66 years old. Boomers won. 1946 to 1954, ages 67 to 75. Post-war babies, 1928 to 1945, they should be 76 years old to 93 years old. And we have World War II babies, born 1922 to 1927. So those would have been people who fought in World War II. So World War II, of course, was, in the 40s, 37, I do believe, to 45. So those would have been people who fought in World War II, and they are ages 94 to 99. So you look at this chart and you see the history behind all of these generations, the experience behind these generations. We're seeing everyone can tell a story. Everyone has a story to tell. And it's a story that each generation should listen to. But Gen Z, Gen Z has a, Gen Z has, in my opinion, this is just my opinion, has a special task before them. They have a task of making sure that the history that is being written now, where we have the big, what I call the big, I don't call it the big lie, I call it the big Nazi lie. They have the task before them, the Generation Z people, to make sure that history is written and told the correct way 40 years from now. When you're in the situation of a boomer or a post-war person, when you're getting up in age, and protests may be totally different, 40 years from now. I'm pretty sure they will be. But in terms of fighting for your rights and civil rights and what have you, the message still stays the same. The message is still equality and inclusion. So when you tell a story, or you tell your grandkids or your great-grandkids or your children, it's up to each generation to make sure that every story is told correctly and to propel the next generation into a situation where they have it better than the generation before them. But unfortunately, in America, because this is such a complex country, stories have always had the ability to be distorted, made up. People say fake news, and as far as I'm concerned, the only fake news is, Newsmax and Fox News, And one thing that Hitler said, and the former guy took up that mantle, if you keep repeating something over and over and over enough, people will believe it. So it's up to each generation to make sure that that doesn't happen. It's up to each generation to make sure that if we're going to tell a story over and over and over and over again, it's the truth. You know, during Hitler's occupation of Germany, you have someone who was born in Austria and went to another country to become a tyrant. He was a tyrant for, a little under 10 years. But he had been doing things to get him to that level. And I see the same thing with the former guy. You have a reality show, you put yourself out there, you make yourself into this image. Go to a correspondence dinner where the president of the United States disses you, then you get pissed off and say, I'm going to run for president, and then you start just saying things about people and doing things and, causing havoc where people who are like you like what you have to say. And you say it over and over and over again. One thing I do believe that the people of Germany, back during World War II, when Hitler was alive, I think at some point they woke up. And they realized that this man is evil. He's wrong. He's lying. And I'm just not going to believe him anymore. But unfortunately, by that time, Hitler had done so much damage and had murdered over 6 million people, if not more, that to get out from up under that took decades for Germany to try to recover from that, if they even really have. So flip over to the United States, where we have people and factions who are constantly lying to us, to you, to me, to my neighbor, to your neighbor. And it's up to each one of us to take information, decipher it. And sometimes you have to do your due diligence and ask yourself, is this really the truth? Is this something I really want to believe? Is this just a load of crap that somebody's throwing out and they see what sticks? You keep throwing it out, throwing it out, throwing it out, and we see what sticks to the wall. And each generation needs to make sure that whatever is happening in our time, when it's our turn, that we take all those lies that stuck to the wall and we take them down. Last summer was a turning point, in my opinion. Again, everything I say is my opinion. Last summer was a turning point for the United States. It was a turning point, and the Gen Z generation, they stepped up. They stepped up, and you know, they made their voices heard, and because of them, many people who have been murdered, executed, hurt, whatever, those people have made sure that the George Floyds um, have remained relevant. Even though I think just George Floyd alone will always be relevant. But again, I say to you, let's respect each generation. Okay, and I'm gonna put this back up on here because I want to, here we go. All right, so Gen Z is from ages 9 to 24. All right, so let's talk about what a 9-year-old could do. Okay, so I'm Gen Z, I'm 9 years old. All this stuff is going on. Can I really make a difference? Yes, you can. Because when you're at school, you're in the schoolyard, or you're out and about playing with your friends and what have you, and someone says something nasty about someone else, be it someone of a different color, of a different race, or they're just being mean, and they're saying something that's not true. That's when you step up and you say, leave this person alone. What you're saying is not true, blah, 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 blah. Okay, then we go to you're 24 years old, you're Gen Z, you're 24 years old, and all this stuff is just happening around you. You have mass shootings, you have, police shootings, you have, just all these different things that are, going on around you. You're hearing things from the news about the election was stolen, lots of things. And that's when you step up and you say, the election was not stolen. You get your facts correct. You go and you do your due diligence and you help people understand what is actually going on. And today's topic, I'm sorry, I have a question about what today's topic is. Today's topic is about how the generations, the various generations can understand each other, can respect each other. And I'm really kind of honing in on Gen Z and what they can do for this country, and how they can help propel us, to a different level. Gen Z can propel us to a different level on a political spectrum, on a social spectrum. They can propel us just in terms of doing what's right. And from what I've seen from last summer, Generation Z came out and they really they took up the mantle. They took up the mantle. Okay, so one of the questions is, do you think that people discount the ideas, movements, and opinions of generations beneath the boomers? Okay, let me put this back up because I want to know, when you say beneath the boomers, are you talking about millennials? When you say beneath the boomers, I mean, I don't understand the question. Who is beneath the boomers? Oh, generations younger than boomers. Okay, so, all right. So, do you think that people discount the ideas, movements, and opinions of the generations beneath the boomers? I think some people do. Um, I think some people do. I will say that when Black Lives Matter first started, and this could have just been a political thing for me, because when Black Lives Matter first started, and especially in the 2016 election, I know that a lot of BLM people were behind Bernie Sanders. And I was not a Bernie Sanders fan. So I admit I did tend to discount a lot of the things that they said, because it seemed like everything was, Bernie, 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 Bernie. And, I'm looking at Hillary Clinton, who, I've always been a fan of. And I'm like, here's this woman who's, no matter how you cut it, she's qualified. She's qualified to step into the office, of the president, sit behind, the resolute desk and, run the country. And I thought that boomers, because they did get behind Bernie, that they really, in my opinion, didn't know what they were talking about, that they needed to look at what was going on during civil rights, whatever. Okay, and then the question is, I have heard older people say that they haven't lived and don't know what full force discrimination is, and their approach for fighting politically or racially is not the way to do it. Okay. I've heard that too. And I do agree with that. I agree with that to a point, because what we went through as boomers too, and what our parents went through, let's see, our parents would have been, at least my parents, post-war boomers, 1928 to born 1928 to 1945. I mean, we're talking about, not being able to use the water fountain. You had colored and you had white. You had, as they would say at a movie theater down south, when you go to a movie theater, the Black people had to sit in heaven, and heaven was the balcony. If there was a court trial or something, Black folks were regulated to heaven, which, when you think about it, okay, I'll go to heaven, you stay down here in hell, but if you don't mind, do you mind just joining in the conversation so we can have a back and forth, or no? Okay, and then you're saying not certain, I agree, times are different. Times are different, but full force discrimination, what do you consider, what do you consider full force discrimination? Because for me, full force discrimination is, the sundown towns, the water fountains, the not being able to vote, if you're accused of whistling at a white woman, you're killed. being lynched. Um, you know, whites, and as you say, whites only signage, that's full force. So yes, times have changed and the struggle is different, but it's still the same. It is still the same. And I wish I had a Gen Z or a millennial on the show now who could, tell me I'm wrong, or, put in a little bit more, whatever, from their point of view, because I'm giving you my point of view as a boomer too. Okay, not a boomer number one, I'm a boomer number two. So I was growing up while my parents were, I was born before Black people were able to vote. And even that, when I think about that, it's like now it's like I can go and vote and it's no problem. I can go and vote and you're supposed to be able to vote with no problem. But, just thinking about something like that you not having the right to vote. So, it would bother me that even when, BLM first started and what have you, how many of them actually went out to vote in 2016? They didn't turn out the way that they should have. And then I'm going to say again what I was saying about Bernie Sanders. There was a lot of animosity from the millennials back then, from that age group. Upset that, Hillary Clinton got the nomination. And I would hear things like, Bernie had 10,000 people at his rally and, Hillary only, had a couple of hundred or a couple of thousand, whatever. And my opinion was always, I don't care if you have 1 million people at a rally. If those 1 million people don't vote and only one person shows up at my rally and that one person goes to vote and I won by 1 vote, that's the only thing that matters. And one thing that millennials tended not to do is vote, whereas boomers and post-war, and World War II babies, we went and we voted. You got 80, 90-year-old men and women standing in line for hours just so they can vote. And that's something that, millennials didn't do. So now we have Gen Z, and I'm wondering, I'm hoping that you step up to the plate in 22 and in 24 and you vote. Because even if a lot of the laws and everything that are being passed right now, if you feel it doesn't affect you, keep thinking that way. Keep thinking that way, because sooner or later, it's going to affect you. Sooner or later, these laws are going to affect you. Like they say, first they came, for the Black people. Then they came for the Jewish people. Then they came for the Hispanics. They came for the Asians. And then you wake up one day and you say, now they're coming for me. And they will. They will come for you. I guarantee you, they will come for you. They will find a reason to come for you. If you don't fit in this particular category, they will come for you. Look at what they just did to Liz Cheney. She dared to say and tell the truth that the 2020 election was fair. It was not stolen. And what happened? All these Republicans hung her out to dry, turned on her. You know how you have that one animal that's hurt and all the other animals will not let them eat or whatever? That's what they did to Liz Cheney, one of their own. So if you think that someone's not coming for you, they will come for you. And that is one thing that I can say, that I think that baby boomers and older have over, not necessarily, I'm gonna take that back, maybe Gen X and older have over millennials and Generation Zs, is we do vote. We will go out there and we will vote. Now, more millennials and Gen Zs voted in 2020, and I'm extremely happy about that. But again, you know, where were millennials in 2020? You know, besides getting upset that Bernie Sanders didn't get the nomination. You know, and then you go to the Democratic, you know, convention and you start to protest and rail outside of the building because Hillary Clinton is the nomination. I'm sorry, is the nominee. But now, fast forward 5 years, and you're pissed off that the former guy was sitting in the Oval Office. And we have insurrections. And we have, you know, the hatred that has just escalated. These terrorist groups that are in the United States are a real threat. Could that have been averted just a little bit if you had voted instead of being pissed off because your nominee didn't win? As I've said before, there's always a loser and there's always a winner. There cannot be a first place if there's not a second place. You cannot be a champion if you're not playing against another team. Everyone cannot win. And as I've said before, I've lost many times. Okay, I lost. Does it hurt sometimes? Yeah, it does. Does it piss you off sometimes? Hell yeah. But it's not going to stop me from moving forward and trying to make sure that, you know, my life is not made better by me supporting the other person. Because by not going out and voting in 2016, and I say this to anyone who call themselves a Democrat, or you want to call yourself a centrist, whatever, a progressive, whatever. If you sat out the election, you didn't vote for the former guy, but you sat out the election because you were pissed, you helped create the monster that is the former guy. You helped create the monsters that are the Republican Party. You helped boost and co-sign every time Mitch McConnell opened his mouth. Every time a Republican went in there and co-signed for one of the former guy's nominees to put in his cabinet, you co-signed for Stephen Miller, Goebbels, the Nazi Goebbels. You co-signed for all of that because you were pissed off. And you decided not to vote. Now, I have asked the question, what about Candace Owens? Okay. I talked about Candace Owens the other day, and she is right up there with Senator Tim Scott Candace Owens, she's going to do what she wants to do. And, she thinks that when she says things that like we don't know, when I say we, I'm talking about, Black people who are liberals or Democrats, progressives, we don't know what we're talking about and we don't know what's good for us. In my opinion, Candace Owens is one of those people that if she was a slave, she would have been working in the house, and whatever master told her, not told her, told her, she would have believed and would have looked her nose down to all of the slaves working in the field. And I say the same thing for Tim Scott. So I just say that I look at a Candace Owens who, she could run for office one day. I hope she doesn't. But these are reasons why we have to vote. There is absolutely no sense when you look at the state of Florida, that the state of Florida should be mired in so much muck that they keep re-electing these Republican officials on the state level and on the national level. It makes no sense. But then you have the Cuban Americans there who have been listening to Republicans for years. The Democrats are socialists. The Democrats are communists. They want to bring back communism. Hillary Clinton is a socialist. Joe Biden is a socialist. And they're being used, and they're buying it hook, line, and sinker. So every time there's an election in Florida, because of the Cuban vote, these people are able to win. And one day, maybe you will wake up and realize you're being used, people, you're being used. Going back to the Chinese Americans who donated to the Proud Boys back in December. You're being used. These people don't like you. They don't like you at all. You're being used. You're giving them what they want. On one hand, money, and on the other hand, you're giving them votes. You give them money and votes, you give them power. And Democrats are not perfect, but far from it. Far from it. But if I have to make a choice, and we are living in a country that is a two-party system, where people have tried to do third parties and, it's extremely hard. Yeah, they'll get votes or whatever. But wake up, people. Wake up. So, looking at Generation Z and Millennials, I don't think they have felt the full force of discrimination. I don't think that they truly understand what that's like. And even though I have had things that have been done to me that I hope my son never has to go through. But then again, my son was in third grade and he was called a nigger at a Christian school. The principal tells me, oh, don't worry about it. It's just a word. she was white. No, it wasn't just a word. And apparently this is being said at home. You know, my son comes, he's crying and what have you. You have to explain to my child. I knew I had to explain to my child about that sooner or later, but I didn't think it would be that soon. But then again, going to a school with white folks is bound to happen. And I should have known, because growing up, I went to school with white folks, you know, but you want to protect your children. And I know that my parents went through things, especially my father, growing up in Alabama. He refused to go back down south, would not go back down south, ever. And he never told us why, but we found out why. And I'm not going to say why, but we found out why. He had a damn good reason. But the discrimination that I went through is nothing like what my parents went through, and nothing like what their parents went through. I mean, my maternal great grandfather was a white man. He was a slave owner. Who raped my great-great-grandmother. That's discrimination. That's racism. That's sexual assault. So yes, times have changed. But have they really? Have they really? I mean, like they say, we're living in Jim Crow 2.0. We're looking where, you know, our very right to vote is in peril. And for some of us, our very right to exist. So while I applaud the Gen Zs and the millennials for taking the protests to another level, I don't want anyone breaking windows. I don't want anyone, you know, committing violence. That I do believe we should fall back to Dr. King, and it should be peaceful. But I still say, remember where you come from. Remember the people who came before you. You know, when Barack Obama, then President Barack Obama, stated that Harriet Tubman would be on the $20 bill by 2020, and then that was nixed by the former guy, but I know it's back in the works where she will be on the $20 bill. There were cruel things that were said about her. And a lot of it had to do with her looks. You know, white folks didn't want her on there, you know, because of, you know, what she represented, and, you know, she's going to replace a white man who had slaves. But from the Black community, I was disappointed. And you're going to, you know, talk about her looks and what have you. And these were your millennials. These were your Gen Zs. Do you know what this woman did for you? Did for us as a culture, as a people? I mean, she was a slave. And through her entire life, you know, you read about Harriet Tubman and things tend to stop when she's like in her 40s. But if you continue to read about her, you read about the things that she did in her 60s and 70s, and 80s. This woman was still fighting until the day she died. She went back south countless times to bring slaves to freedom through the Underground Railroad. Could have been one of your, relatives. And you're going to diss her? So again, I go to your Gen Zs and your millennials, know where you come from. Because we went through a lot of crap. Go visit those slave cemeteries where the headstones are absent, but they're there. These nameless people who put up with so much shit and so much crap, being beaten and sold and raped for you, for me. In 2017, I was in Washington, and I went to Mount Vernon, which was George Washington. And they had a slave cemetery there that was, in the past 20 years, had been kind of refurbished to the point where they were acknowledging that it was a slave cemetery. And it was one of the most, I had been to slave cemeteries before, but on this particular occasion, it was a very nice day. The birds were out chirping, whatever. And one thing that I noticed that as I was going on this tour, you got all these people standing around Martha and George's graves. Their graves are there and whatever. Then you have this sign. It wasn't a big sign, that said slave cemetery. So I walked over there. I was by myself. I walked over there and didn't see a lot of people over there. But the people who did come over there were Black. And we looked at each other, gave each other that nod. And we just all we were each in our own thoughts, whatever. But it was one of the most, that particular time was one of the most profound things that just hit me. And I stood there literally crying and saying, thank you, I'm sorry. Thank you, and I'm sorry. So when you want to diss Harriet Tubman, at least she has a headstone, thank God. But the millions of people who went through that middle passage to come from Africa to be sold in Britain, and some of these, other places before they finally made it to America. Those are the people that you need to appreciate. Those are the people who felt full force discrimination. Those are the people. We forget about them. I have on a t-shirt from the National Museum of African American History from Washington. And that was another incredible place. And I would like to go there again. Just an incredible place. And the shirt says, a people's journey, a nation's story. So while, a nation's story, this is part of our story. Gen Z, this is part of your story. Now this summer, I think we're going to see some protests. I think we are. Are they going to be at the level that they were last summer? I don't know. Are they going to be violent in some cases because of law enforcement? I don't know. Because the former guy's not occupying the White House. He's not throwing out those dog whistles. Because a lot of the violence that happened last summer was escalated by law enforcement. And that's a fact. It's on tape. Can't blame everything on Black Lives Matter. But, you know, I have to say that Gen Z, you have the opportunity. Millennials, you have the opportunity. But mainly Gen Z, you have the opportunity to take this protest to the next level and make it positive and learn and inform and educate about the people who came before you. As I had to learn and at times educate people about the people who came before me. And if you don't know what the Middle Passage is, you know, when slaves were brought over from Africa and the horrendous conditions that they went through, you know, or Nat Turner. White folks don't like talking about Nat Turner because he led a slavery revolt where he killed white people. He was like, I'm sick of this shit. Nat Turner was one of the Black Lives Matter. He was one of the heroes of Black Lives Matter. So do I think that their approach, you know, fighting politically or racially is not the way to do it? Somewhat, because they need to remember where they come from. And I definitely don't think it should be any violence. But they need to understand, especially our Black Gen Zs and millennials. And Candace Owen, she needs to understand where she came from too. And I don't like people saying, oh, that's in the past. No, it's not. It's still right here in the present, especially if you got somebody waving a Confederate flag. So my hour is about up. Once again, you know, thank you for listening. And always speak your truth. Speak the truth. And understand what the truth is. And please, if you are able to, you're old enough, register to vote. Every vote counts. Every vote matters. We cannot afford to live in a country that we had between 2017, January 20th, 2017 to January 20th, 2021. We cannot go back to that, ever. And we can never allow another January 6th, 2021 violent, murderous insurrection to ever happen again. We need to have more January 5th, like what happened in Georgia. We need to have more of those, where Reverend Warnock and John Ossoff won United States Senate seats. There's a lot of work to do, and Gen Z can lead us with that, but you still got to look at us boomers. You still got to look at us, and we do also know what we're talking about. But in order for, and I say this to no matter what generation you're from, and I'm not just talking to people of color, I'm talking to white people too. Your history, wherever you're from, has affected the country we live in. If your people were slaveholders, it affected this country. If your people were dirt poor, Black, white, Hispanic, Italian, whatever, Irish, it affected this country. And all I'm saying is, let's just tell the truth about this country. Let's tell the truth about what is going on. And every generation has to propel the next generation and understand the generations before them, just like I have to understand the generations that are coming after me. So on that note, again, speak your truth. Thank you for coming. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.